Picture this. It's 1206 in the frozen steppes of Central Asia, and a man named Temujin stands before a gathering of Mongol tribes. He's not wearing the robes of a wealthy king. He's a former outcast, someone who grew up struggling for survival in one of Earth's harshest environments. Yet in this moment, the tribal leaders proclaim him Genghis Khan, the universal ruler of all Mongols, within a single generation. This one man would create the largest contiguous empire in human history. His descendants would control territories stretching from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe, across 3 continents and countless cultures. But how did a nomadic people known for horseback warfare become the architects of global trade, cultural exchange, and political transformation? How did they go from outsiders to the most powerful force the world had ever seen? Genghis Khan's birth name was Temujin, and his childhood was far from privileged. Around 1162, he was born near Lake Baikal on the Mongolian steppe. His father was killed in a local tribal conflict when Temujin was young, forcing him into poverty and isolation. The young boy grew up knowing hunger, betrayal, and constant danger. Between 1195 and 1205, everything changed. Through a series of military victories and political alliances, Temujin united all the fragmented Mongol clans under his leadership. He did something unprecedented in steppe history. He abolished the old tribal divisions and reorganized his people based on military merit and loyalty rather than family bloodlines. This revolutionary approach broke down centuries of tradition. Soldiers rose in rank based on their abilities, not their noble birth. In 1206, his followers proclaimed him Genghis Khan at a grand assembly. From that moment forward, the empire's expansion seemed unstoppable. Starting around 1207, Genghis Khan launched campaigns against his neighbors. The kingdom of Shixia in northwest China fell under Mongol control. In 1211, he led his armies across the Gobi Desert to attack the Jin dynasty, one of China's most powerful states at the time. By 1215, the Jin dynasty capital of Zhongdu was conquered. The Mongols weren't just skilled warriors. They were brilliant strategists who learned quickly from their enemies. When they encountered fortified cities, they adapted. They studied Chinese siege warfare techniques and incorporated them into their tactics. They were willing to accept military innovations from any culture. This openness to learning became one of their greatest strengths. Genghis Khan's most ambitious conquest began in 1219. He turned his attention westward toward the Khwarezmian Empire, a vast power spanning Central Asia and the Islamic world. What triggered this invasion was an insult. A Khwarezmian Shah had executed Mongol envoys, an act that Genghis Khan viewed as unforgivable. He sent his armies in multiple directions simultaneously, a strategy that overwhelmed his enemies. The Khwarezmian forces couldn't defend their scattered territories. City after city fell. The empire that had seemed untouchable crumbled within years. By 1221, the Khwarezmian ruler fled, and Mongol dominion extended deep into the Islamic world. When warriors became administrators after Genghis Khan's death in 1227, his son Genghis Khan continued the expansion with the same intensity. Between 1229 and 1234, the Mongols completed their conquest of northern China by destroying the Jin dynasty. Ugidi then turned his attention to the Middle East and Europe. His forces swept through Persia, capturing cities and bringing them under Mongol rule. Beginning in 1237, the Mongols invaded the lands of the Kievan Rus, sacking cities and crushing any resistance. They didn't stop there. In 1240 and 1241, Mongol armies attacked Poland, Hungary, and other Eastern European territories. European kingdoms trembled at the reports of these fearsome warriors. Cities were offered a simple choice to surrender and pay tribute or face complete annihilation. Most chose surrender. In 1241, something unexpected happened. Genghis Khan died suddenly. His commanders, who were preparing to invade further into Europe, received orders to return home for succession ceremonies. To the relief of Western Europe, these armies never returned. The succession took 5 years to resolve, and European powers received an unexpected reprieve. When order was restored, Mongol Khan, one of Genghis Khan's grandsons, took power. Rather than abandon conquest, Mongol renewed campaigns in southern China and the Middle East. In 1258, his general Legu led an army against Baghdad, the glittering capital of the Islamic Abbasid Caliphate. The siege was merciless. When the walls fell, the city was ransacked. Libraries that had preserved centuries of Islamic knowledge were burned. Hospitals were destroyed. Historians later wrote that the Tigris River ran black with ink from burning books and red with blood from the slaughter. The empire's expansion didn't end with military conquest. Genghis Khan understood something crucial. Empires maintained through terror alone eventually collapse. Instead, he created a legal code called the Yasa, which established clear rules governing the empire. This code enforced religious tolerance and protected merchants and traders. Rather than forcing conquered peoples to abandon their cultures, the Mongols allowed local customs and religions to continue. A Persian might serve alongside a Chinese official and a European missionary. This meritocratic approach to governance was revolutionary for its time. Officials were chosen based on competence rather than ethnic background or family connections. This system of inclusive administration allowed the Mongols to govern vast territories containing dozens of different peoples and languages. By 1259, when Genghis Khan died, the Mongol Empire had reached its greatest territorial extent. It stretched from Korea and the Sea of Japan in the east to Eastern Europe and the Mediterranean in the west. From Siberia in the north to southern China and the Persian Gulf in the south. No empire in human history had controlled such vast, contiguous territory. It was an achievement that seemed impossible for any single political entity to maintain. The empire then split among Genghis Khan's descendants. His grandson Kublai Khan took control of the eastern territories and formally established the Yuan dynasty in China in 1271. He became the first foreign ruler to conquer and control all of China. Unlike his predecessors, Kublai moved his capital from the nomadic headquarters of Karakoram to Beijing, adopting Chinese cultural practices and embracing civilized governance. His brother Legu controlled the Persian territories as the Ilkhanate. Another brother's descendants ruled the Golden Horde in Russia. A fourth section, the Chagatai Khanate, controlled Central Asia. Commerce, culture, and catastrophe, the Mongol Empire's greatest gift to the world wasn't military power. It was the peace and stability they imposed across Eurasia. This period became known as the Pax Mongolica, or Mongol Peace. For the first time in centuries, merchants could travel long distances without fear of bandits or regional warlords. The Mongols established the Yam, a sophisticated relay station system spanning thousands of miles. These stations provided fresh horses, food, and shelter for merchants and travelers. The infrastructure turned the legendary Silk Road from a dangerous collection of fragmented routes into a well-maintained highway connecting east and west. Trade exploded. Merchants from Europe, the Middle East, and Asia exchanged goods on a scale never before seen. Chinese silks flowed westward. Spices from the Indian islands traveled to European markets. Persian carpets and metalwork moved along the routes. Persian administrative practices and Chinese technology spread eastward. Cities that had previously been isolated trade outposts transformed into thriving cosmopolitan centers. Samarkand, Bukhara, and Kashgar became melting pots of diverse cultures. Buddhist monks, Muslim scholars, Christian missionaries, and Confucian officials lived and worked alongside Mongol administrators. Ideas traveled as freely as goods. Mathematical concepts, astronomical knowledge, artistic techniques, and religious philosophies circulated throughout the empire. The Mongols demonstrated remarkable religious tolerance. In their courts, you could find Muslims and Christians, Buddhists and Zoroastrians, all serving the same rulers. This was extraordinary for the medieval world. Marco Polo, the famous Venetian merchant, is perhaps the most celebrated symbol of this era. In 1271, at just 17 years old, he departed Venice with his father and uncle for the court of Kublai Khan. The journey took him across deserts and mountains, through lands few Europeans had ever seen. When he finally reached Kublai's summer palace in 1275, the young merchant impressed the powerful ruler with his intelligence and abilities. Kublai Khan employed Marco Polo as a special envoy, sending him on diplomatic and commercial missions throughout the empire. Over the next 17 years, Marco Polo traveled to regions no European had explored before. He visited what are now Burma, India, and Tibet. He governed a Chinese city. He served on the Khan's personal council. Marco Polo's accounts in his famous travel narrative opened European minds to the sophistication and magnificence of Eastern civilization. He described Kublai Khan's palaces, the efficient postal system, paper money, and innovations like coal as a fuel source and eyeglasses. His writings later influenced explorers like Christopher Columbus, who carried a copy of Marco Polo's travels during his voyages of discovery. Under Mongol rule, paper money became the standardized currency throughout the empire. This monetary innovation, based on the value of the Khan's authority rather than precious metals, facilitated commerce across vast distances. The empire also allowed banking practices like bills of exchange to flourish, spreading these financial innovations westward. However, prosperity carries hidden costs. The trade routes that brought wealth also carried disease. Scientists believe the Black Death, the bubonic plague that devastated Europe in the 1340s, originated in Central Asia and traveled westward along these same Silk Road routes. The plague, which killed millions, indirectly contributed to the empire's decline. By the 1350s, the Mongol Empire began fragmenting. The four Khanates pursued their own interests rather than acting as a unified whole. The Ilkhanate fell between 1335 and 1353. The Yuan dynasty in China lost control of its territories in 1368 when the Ming dynasty, supported by Han Chinese nationalism, overthrew Mongol rule. The Golden Horde in Russia began breaking apart in the 15th century. Within a century of Kublai Khan's death in 1294, the once mighty empire had dissolved into smaller regional powers, each pursuing its own agenda. The Mongol legacy proved far more durable than their political empire. They united vast regions that remain unified today. They demonstrated that meritocracy and religious tolerance could hold together the most diverse empire in history. They showed that nomadic peoples could master settled civilizations and learn from them. Their impact on world history was profound and lasting. They established the Silk Road as the primary artery of global commerce. They facilitated unprecedented cultural exchange between isolated civilizations. They pioneered concepts of free trade and international commerce that wouldn't fully emerge again until the modern era. They created pathways of communication and commerce that shaped history for centuries. From a boy named Temujin struggling to survive on the steppe to Kublai Khan ruling millions in splendid palaces, the Mongol saga represents one of history's most remarkable transformations of power. Their story demonstrates that geography is not destiny, and that human determination and organizational brilliance can reshape the world in fundamental ways. The Mongol Empire rose from obscurity to become civilization's greatest continental power, eventually fragmented into smaller realms, yet left behind a legacy that persists to this day.